For more than 2 decades, Cameron Diaz was the golden girl of Hollywood, radiant, funny, and effortlessly charming. From her breakout in The Mask to her unforgettable roles in There's Something About Mary, Charlie's Angels, and The Holiday, Cameron wasn't just a movie star. She was a symbol of joy, beauty, and independence. She had everything: fame, fortune, and a smile that could light up the screen. But behind that dazzling charm was a woman quietly fighting battles that few ever saw. Then, just as she reached the peak of her success, Cameron Diaz vanished. No premieres, no interviews, no new films. She walked away from Hollywood without warning. Fans were stunned. How could someone at the top of the world suddenly disappear? What had gone so wrong that one of the most beloved actresses of her generation decided she'd had enough? What few people knew was that Cameron's perfect life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. The pressure of fame, the loneliness of stardom, and the personal heartbreaks she carried had begun to take their toll. For years, she had smiled through the pain, hiding exhaustion behind humor and grace. But when the lights went out, Cameron faced a truth she could no longer ignore. She wasn't happy. Now, at 53, the story of Cameron Diaz is one of both heartbreak and strength. It's the story of a woman who lost herself in the spotlight only to find peace by walking away from it. What happened to Cameron Diaz, and what drove her to leave it all behind, will change the way you see her forever. Before she became one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, Cameron Diaz was just a California girl with big dreams and no connections. Born in San Diego in 1972, she grew up in a modest working-class family. Her father, Emilio, worked as a foreman for an oil company, while her mother, Billy, was an import-export agent. Life was simple, but not always easy. Cameron later admitted that she never imagined a future in Hollywood. She just wanted to see the world. At only 16, her striking looks caught the attention of a photographer, and before long, she signed her first modeling contract with Elite Model Management. It seemed glamorous, exotic shoots, international travel, high fashion, but it wasn't what she expected. Beneath the surface, the industry was brutal. Long hours, constant judgment, and endless pressure to be perfect took a toll on her confidence. "You're never enough," she once said. "Too tall, too thin, too tan, too pale. There's always something wrong with you." Then fate intervened. In 1994, Cameron auditioned for a little film starring a then-unknown comedian named Jim Carrey. She had zero acting experience, but her charisma was undeniable. The movie was The Mask, and overnight, Cameron Diaz became a star. Her infectious energy and effortless beauty made her a sensation. Hollywood couldn't get enough of her. Roles poured in: My Best Friend's Wedding, There's Something About Mary, Charlie's Angels, Shrek. For nearly 2 decades, Cameron was everywhere, to the world. She seemed to have it all: success, fame, and a life most could only dream of. But behind closed doors, she was struggling to keep up. The constant pressure to maintain her looks, her career, and her public image left her drained. The glamorous red carpets masked the loneliness she often felt when the cameras turned off. "Everyone sees the happy version of you," she later confessed. "But they don't see the person who goes home and questions everything." Cameron's success also came with an unseen price: exhaustion. She worked non-stop, sometimes filming back-to-back projects for years. Friends say she barely had time to breathe, let alone live a normal life. And while audiences adored her for her bright personality, Cameron quietly battled anxiety and burnout. Hollywood had given her everything, but it was also slowly taking everything away. By the late 2000s, Cameron's personal life began to mirror her professional fatigue. She had been in several high-profile relationships, with Jared Leto, Justin Timberlake, and others, but none seemed to last. The tabloids were relentless, turning her heartbreaks into headlines. She was labeled "unlucky in love," a cruel nickname that only deepened her desire to retreat from the public eye. As she entered her 40s, Cameron started questioning her purpose. Acting had defined her life, but it no longer fulfilled her. She began to see how fame had taken control of her identity. "When you're in the spotlight for that long, you start to forget who you are without it," she said. "You become a product, not a person." Then came the breaking point, the moment Cameron realized she couldn't do it anymore. Hollywood had always demanded more beauty, more energy, more perfection. But Cameron Diaz was done giving. She didn't want to pretend. She didn't want to perform. She wanted peace. In 2014, after finishing Annie, Cameron made a decision that shocked the industry. She quit acting. No farewell tour, no announcement, no drama. She simply walked away. At the time, no one understood why. Fans assumed she was taking a short break, but deep down, Cameron knew it might be forever. After 2 decades of being watched, judged, and idolized, she wanted something she hadn't had in years, a life of her own. And as she stepped away from the spotlight, she would soon discover both the beauty and the heartbreak of leaving fame behind. When Cameron Diaz walked away from Hollywood, the world was stunned. Reporters called it a mystery retirement, but to her it wasn't mysterious at all. It was survival. For over 20 years, she had lived under relentless pressure to stay young, flawless, and relevant. Every wrinkle was analyzed, every relationship dissected, every role compared to her last. She had become a brand rather than a person, and the weight of maintaining that image had finally become unbearable. The silence after fame was deafening. For the first time in decades, Cameron didn't have a packed schedule, a film set to rush to, or a publicist planning her next move. She later described it as both liberating and terrifying, a void she had never experienced. "I had given more than half my life to the public," she said. "I needed to take it back." During this period of self-discovery, Cameron realized how much she had missed out on. While others her age were settling down, building families, and finding balance, she had been chasing scripts, living out of suitcases, and pretending to be characters that no longer reflected who she was. She began to confront the loneliness that had followed her throughout her career. "When you're on every magazine cover, everyone thinks you have everything," she reflected. "But sometimes that's when you feel the most alone." Her decision to retreat wasn't just about escaping fame. It was about healing. Years of constant work had taken a toll on her health, both mentally and physically. She had struggled with exhaustion, burnout, and a loss of identity. Hollywood's obsession with perfection had made her question her own worth. Away from the spotlight, Cameron finally had the time to reconnect with herself. She began exploring what truly made her happy. For the first time in years, she cooked for herself, slept without an alarm, and enjoyed simple things like gardening and traveling privately. She started reading about health and the human body, a curiosity that would later grow into a lifelong passion. Cameron became fascinated by the science of aging and self-care. Her journey led her to write 2 best-selling wellness books, The Body Book and The Longevity Book. Where she shared lessons, she had learned about living authentically and taking control of one's health, but behind that, newfound wisdom was also pain. The pain of realizing how much of her youth had been shaped by the unrealistic expectations of others. Hollywood had celebrated her beauty, but it had also trapped her inside it. "I became a prisoner of my image," she once admitted. "People didn't want me to change, but I was changing. I'm human." Then in 2015, something unexpected happened. Love found her when she least expected it. Cameron met Benji Madden, the guitarist from the band Good Charlotte. The two came from completely different worlds. She, a retired actress who craved peace. He, a tattooed rock musician with a wild past. Yet somehow, they understood each other deeply. Within a year, they married in a small, private ceremony at her Los Angeles home. For Cameron, Benji wasn't just a partner. He was an anchor. He loved her for who she was, not for who the world expected her to be. Friends close to the couple say their relationship grounded her in ways fame never could. "He makes her feel safe," one source said. For the first time in her life, she doesn't have to perform. After years of heartbreaks and false starts, Cameron finally found a love that was calm, real, and lasting. But even with happiness in her personal life, she still carried the weight of everything she'd endured. Stepping away from acting hadn't erased the scars of her fame. It had simply given her the space to heal them. Cameron once compared her exit from Hollywood to waking up from a long dream. For so many years, she'd lived in a world where everyone wanted something from her. A role, a smile, a headline. Now she was finally living for herself. She spent her days focusing on health, love, and rediscovering joy. The glitz of red carpets had been replaced by the glow of a quieter, simpler happiness. But her story wasn't done yet. Because a few years later, life would test Cameron Diaz in a way she never saw coming, through one of the most emotional and life-changing chapters of her journey. For Cameron Diaz, happiness had finally started to feel real. She had love, peace, and a sense of freedom she hadn't known since her teenage years. But even in this newfound calm, something was missing. A dream she had carried quietly for